My name's Marcus, and I've got a 12-year-old kid named Dylan. His mom, Vanessa, and I split up about 4 months ago. We'd been married for 13 years, and honestly, I thought we were doing okay. Sure, we had our problems like any couple, but I never saw the divorce coming. Turns out I was the only one who thought we had a marriage worth saving. Turns out I was blind to a lot of things. Vanessa comes from serious money, like serious money. Her parents, Harrison and Beatrice Thornton, basically own half the commercial properties in our county. They've got their fingers in everything from shopping centers to office buildings to luxury apartments. The kind of family where everyone knows their name and nobody wants to cross them. When I met Vanessa at some charity fundraiser 14 years ago, I was just a civil engineer trying to build a decent career. I was 28, working on sustainable building designs and genuinely passionate about my work. Vanessa was volunteering at the event, or more accurately, she was posing for photographs while pretending to volunteer. But I didn't see that at the time. I saw this beautiful, charming woman who seemed genuinely interested when I talked about green architecture and energy-efficient design. She asked smart questions. She laughed at my jokes. She made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the room. We got married 6 months later. Fast, I know, but I was head over heels. Dylan came along a year after that, and I thought we were building something real. A family, a life, a partnership. Took me way too long to figure out the truth. 8 years to be exact. Vanessa wanted the optics, the perfect family photos for her political ambitions, the sympathetic backstory of the devoted wife and mother. She never actually wanted to do the work of being a wife or a mom. She was always traveling for work, always networking at events, always building her public profile and for some future campaign. Meanwhile, I was the one doing homework with Dylan every night, coaching his soccer team on weekends, taking him to every doctor's appointment, every dentist visit, every parent-teacher conference. I was the one who knew his favorite foods, his fears, his dreams. I was the parent. She was the photo opportunity. When she served me with divorce papers last September, I wasn't even that surprised. What shocked me was how vicious it got immediately. Like within days of being served, her lawyer started filing motions claiming I was emotionally unstable, that Dylan wasn't safe with me, that I had anger issues. They had witnesses lined up, all Thornton family friends and business associates, ready to swear under oath that they'd seen me drinking excessively around my kid or acting erratic and threatening. Complete and total fabrication. I'm not a big drinker. Maybe a beer with dinner once a week. I've never raised my voice to Dylan in anger, never laid a hand on him, never done anything that could remotely be considered dangerous or unstable. But the Thorntons had money and connections, and they were using both to paint me as an unfit father. It was terrifying watching these lies pile up in legal documents, knowing that a judge would be reading them and potentially believing them. Dylan started coming home from court-ordered visits with Vanessa's family, looking stressed and withdrawn. He stopped eating properly. Started having nightmares. One night, about 3 weeks after the divorce papers were served, he came into the kitchen where I was cleaning up after dinner and just stood there looking at me with these haunted eyes. "Dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "Mom's lawyer called again. He wants to talk to me without you there." I set down the dish I was holding very carefully, trying to control the anger that flared in my chest. "That's not how this works, buddy. You don't have to talk to anyone unless I'm present. What did you tell him?" I hung up. Dylan met my eyes, and I saw something there that made my heart ache. A wariness, a fear that no 12-year-old should have. "Is it true what Grandma Beatrice said? That they're going to make sure you can't see me anymore?" I moved around the table and crouched beside him, putting my hands on his shoulders. "Dylan, listen to me. I've been your dad since the day you were born. I've coached your teams, helped with your projects, been there for every nightmare and every celebration. That doesn't just stop because your mom and I couldn't make our marriage work. I'm not going anywhere." "But the Thorntons have money," Dylan said, and his voice cracked. "Everyone says they always win." The kid was right about that. The Thorntons had a reputation in our county for getting what they wanted, whether through legitimate means or otherwise. They'd crushed business competitors, silenced critics, made problems disappear. And now they'd decided I was a problem. A few days later, Dylan told me they'd made him talk to some psychiatrist without me present. Dr. Leonard Marsh, supposedly a neutral evaluator. The guy had asked Dylan all these leading questions about whether he felt safe with me, whether he'd seen me lose my temper, whether I ever drank too much or said inappropriate things. Dylan said he told the truth every time, but Marsh kept rephrasing the same questions in different ways, like he was fishing for specific answers. It felt wrong, Dad, Dylan told me. Like he already knew what he wanted me to say and was just trying to get me to say it. I hired this attorney, Laura Kim, who specializes in taking on powerful families in custody disputes. She's in her 50s, built her whole reputation defending underdogs against people exactly like the Thorntons. When I called her 3 weeks after Vanessa served me, she took my case immediately. They're playing dirty, Laura said at our first meeting, sliding a folder across her desk. Vanessa's lawyer, Stephen Garrett, has filed motions claiming you're emotionally unstable. They've got 3 witnesses, all McCulloch family friends, ready to testify that they've seen you drinking excessively and displaying erratic behavior around Dylan. That's completely fabricated, I said, my jaw tight. I know, but we need to prove it. The Thorntons are also pushing for an immediate temporary custody order, claiming Dylan is in danger in your home. Laura leaned forward, her expression serious. Marcus, I need you to understand something. They're not just trying to win custody. They're trying to erase you completely from Dylan's life. I've seen this pattern before with powerful families. They want total control. Why? I asked. Dylan's my son, not their trophy. To them, he's both. Think about it. You're the civil engineer who designed the new civic center, the hospital expansion. You've got community respect, a solid professional reputation. They see Dylan as part of their legacy, their empire. With you out of the picture, they can mold him into whatever they want. The thought made me sick. But Laura was right. The Thorntons didn't see Dylan as a person with his own thoughts and feelings. They saw him as property, as an asset to be controlled and deployed for their benefit. Things escalated fast after that. I started getting anonymous, threatening texts. Stop fighting this. You'll only hurt Dylan. He belongs with his mother. I knew they were from Beatrice Thornton, the matriarch of the family. She thought she could intimidate me into giving up. Someone leaked fake stories about me to local bloggers, claiming I'd been seen drunk at bars when I was supposed to be picking Dylan up from school. Easy enough to disprove with timestamp security footage and witness statements, but the damage was done. People were talking. Colleagues were giving me concerned looks. My boss called me in to ask if everything was okay at home. The worst came about 2 weeks before the hearing. Vanessa's brother, Julian, actually called me up and tried to bribe me. Julian runs the Thornton family's real estate empire and has the conscience of a snake. He's the kind of guy who'd foreclose on an orphanage if it meant a better quarterly profit. Let's talk man to man, Julian said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. This custody fight is going to hurt Dylan. Why don't you do the right thing and settle? We'll give you visitation every other weekend. You can still be in his life. I'm his father, I said, keeping my voice level. Not a weekend hobby. You're a civil engineer pulling in, what, $90,000 a year? We can offer you $200,000 to walk away cleanly. That's a lot of money for a middle-class guy like you. You could start over, maybe meet someone new, have more kids. I actually laughed. You're trying to buy my son from me. We're trying to make this easier on everyone. Dylan belongs with his mother. He belongs with family who can give him the best opportunities. I am his family, I said, and no amount of money will change that. Julian's voice hardened. Then you're a fool. We're going to destroy you in that courtroom. We have witnesses, evaluations, evidence. The judge will see you for what you are, a bitter ex-husband trying to punish his wife by using their child. I hung up and immediately called Laura to report the attempted bribery. She made detailed notes of the date, time, and content of the call. They're getting desperate, Laura said. That's good for us. Desperate people make mistakes. The worst part of all of this was watching what it did to Dylan. He's 12 years old and he was carrying all this weight on his shoulders. The Thorntons kept telling him I was going to lose, that he'd be living with them soon, going to boarding school in Europe. They showed him a bedroom they'd set up for him at their mansion, decorated it without asking what he liked, just assuming he'd be grateful for their generosity. Nobody asked what he actually wanted. Nobody cared that he was terrified of losing his dad. I tried to keep things normal at home. We still did homework together every night, still watched our favorite shows, still made pancakes on Sunday mornings. But I could see the stress eating away at him. He lost weight, started biting his nails, had dark circles under his eyes from not sleeping well. Then one night, about 2 weeks before the hearing, Dylan came home from a court-ordered dinner at the Thorntons' estate and went straight to his room without saying a word. I gave him some space, but after an hour, I went to check on him. I found him sitting on his bed with his phone in his hands, tears streaming down his face. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, sitting down beside him. "What happened?" "They said you're going to lose," Dylan whispered, his voice breaking. "Grandma Beatrice showed me the bedroom again. She said I'd be living there soon, going to boarding school in Switzerland in the fall. Mom was there with this guy, Mr. Castellano, and they were holding hands. Nobody even asked me what I wanted. They just talked about me, like I wasn't even there." I put my arm around his shoulders and felt him shaking. "What do you want, Dylan?" "I want to stay with you," he said immediately. "I want things to be normal again. I want to stop being scared all the time." He wiped his eyes and looked up at me, and in that moment, he seemed much older than 12. "Dad, they said things tonight. Bad things about you, about their plans for me. They thought I was in the bathroom, but I was in the hallway. I heard them talking." "What did they say?" Dylan's hands were trembling as he unlocked his phone. "Can your lawyer use recordings, like if someone recorded something on their phone?" My heart started pounding. "Depending on the state law and circumstances, yes. Why?" "Because I've been recording things ever since Grandma Beatrice sent that text message from Uncle Julian's phone telling me I should lie about you to the judge." Dylan's voice was steady now, determined. I knew something was wrong, so I started recording when I was at their house. "Dad, just listen, please." I took the phone from him with shaking hands. There were 15 voice memos, each one carefully labeled with dates and locations. I pressed play on the most recent one, from that night's dinner. Beatrice's voice came through crystal clear. "The boy needs to understand his place. He'll testify that he wants to stay with Vanessa, or we'll make sure he regrets it." Vanessa's voice, slurred slightly like she'd been drinking. "Mother, he's 12. He's not going to understand the big picture." Then a man's voice I didn't recognize. Ricardo Castellano, I realized. Vanessa's affair partner. "Once you have full custody, we can proceed with the trust fund restructuring. The kid doesn't need to know his grandmother left him that money. It'll be tied up in investments we control." Harrison's voice, authoritative and cold. "Exactly. And with Marcus out of the picture, we can finally move forward with our plans for Dylan's future. Boarding school in Switzerland, then whatever university we choose. He'll be useful to the family business eventually." Then Vanessa laughing, actually laughing. "God, I can't believe I wasted 13 years pretending to be a devoted mother. At least it'll make good campaign material. The dedicated single mom who fought for her child." Beatrice again. "Your father's Senate campaign needs the sympathy vote. Your divorce, your struggle with your ex-husband, your dedication to Dylan despite everything. It's perfect." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. Dylan had recorded his own mother admitting she'd never cared about him, admitting to a conspiracy to steal his inheritance from his late grandmother, admitting to using him as nothing more than a political prop. "There's more," Dylan said quietly. "From other nights. Them coaching me on what to say to the judge. Them talking about paying Dr. Marsh to write a bad evaluation of you. Mom and Mr. Castellano talking about getting married as soon as the divorce is final." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And one from last week where Grandma Beatrice slapped Mom for being too obvious about the affair. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard them fighting and I recorded it." I pulled my son close, holding him tight. "You've been carrying this alone all these weeks? I didn't know what else to do," Dylan said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "I thought if I told you, they'd find out somehow and hurt you. They're always saying how much power they have, how they can make problems disappear. I was scared, Dad." "Listen to me, Dylan." I pulled back to look at him. "You did the right thing. You protected yourself and documented the truth. That takes real courage. But I need you to understand something. When we use these recordings in court, things are going to get very ugly. Your mother and her family are going to be furious. They might say terrible things about you, about me. Are you prepared for that?" Dylan's jaw set with a determination that reminded me of myself. "I know, but I don't want to live with people who talk about me like I'm a chess piece. I want to live with you. You're the only one who's ever really cared about me." That night, after Dylan finally fell asleep, I called Laura and played her the recordings. There was a long silence when they finished. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could almost feel her processing what she'd just heard. "Marcus," Laura finally said, her voice tight with controlled fury, "this is explosive. This isn't just custody evidence. This is proof of conspiracy to commit fraud regarding Dylan's inheritance. Evidence of parental alienation, emotional misuse, witness tampering. If Beatrice really did slap Vanessa, that's attack. And the fact that they've corrupted the psychiatric evaluation process by paying to Marsh, this is huge. Can we use it? I asked. Virginia is a one-party consent state for recordings. As long as one person in the conversation consents to being recorded, and Dylan was present for all of these, they're absolutely admissible. But Marcus, we need to be strategic about this. The Thorntons will claim the recordings are manipulated or taken out of context. They'll throw everything they have at discrediting them. We need to present them in a way that's irrefutable. What do you suggest? Laura's voice held a fierce satisfaction. Let them walk into court confident. Let them present their manufactured case. Let them lie under oath about being devoted family members who only want what's best for Dylan. And then we let Dylan speak. We let him play those recordings in open court. We let the judge hear, in the Thorntons' own words, exactly what kind of people they are. The week before the hearing was hell. The McCullough family's campaign against me intensified to a level I didn't think was possible. Anonymous letters appeared at my workplace, claiming I was under investigation for child neglect. My boss called me in again, more concerned this time. I had to show him the court documents proving the allegations were false. Someone leaked a false story to a local blogger about me being seen drunk at a bar instead of picking Dylan up from school on a specific date. I had to provide timestamp security footage from my office showing I'd been at work, plus the school's sign-out log showing I'd picked Dylan up on time. The blogger issued a quiet retraction, but the damage was done. The story had been shared hundreds of times on social media. Stephen Garrett, Vanessa's lawyer, filed an emergency motion requesting supervised visitation only, citing ongoing concerns about my stability and Dylan's expressed wishes to remain with his mother. Dylan had expressed no such wishes. When the court investigator came to interview him, a genuine court-appointed professional this time, not the Thorntons' bought psychiatrist, Dylan was careful. He answered questions honestly but didn't reveal his recordings. Not yet. They asked if I wanted to live with mom or dad, Dylan told me that evening. I said I wanted what was best for me. They asked if I felt safe with you. I said I've always felt safe with you. How did they react? The investigator seemed nice. She said she'd talk to both of you and then make a recommendation to the judge. Dylan hesitated. But then Uncle Julian called her after she left. I heard him through the door when I was at Mom's apartment. He was offering her consulting work with the family business. Even the court investigator. The Thorntons were trying to corrupt every single piece of the process, every person involved. It was systematic, calculated, and absolutely terrifying in its scope. The night before the hearing, neither Dylan nor I could sleep. I lay awake in bed thinking about everything that could go wrong, every way the Thorntons might still win despite Dylan's evidence. They had money, power, connections that reached into every corner of our county. What did I have? The truth. And a smart, brave son who'd had the courage to document that truth. At 2 a.m, I heard my bedroom door creak open. Dylan stood there in his pajamas, looking small and scared. Can't sleep either? I asked. He shook his head and climbed into bed beside me like he used to when he was little and had nightmares. We lay there in the dark for a while, not talking. I'm scared, Dad, Dylan finally said. What if they don't believe the recordings? What if the judge thinks I made them up or edited them or something? Then we'll deal with it, I said, pulling him close. But Dylan, no matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know something. I've never been prouder of anyone than I am of you right now. What you did standing up for yourself, documenting the truth even when you were scared, that took real courage. I just want us to be together, Dylan whispered. I don't care about their money or their big house or any of it. I just want my dad. I held my son close, making a silent vow. The Thorntons had no idea what they'd unleashed. They thought they could manipulate, bribe, and intimidate their way to victory. But I'd spent my career building structures that could withstand earthquakes and hurricanes. I knew how to find weaknesses in foundations, how to apply pressure at exactly the right points to bring corrupt systems crashing down. Tomorrow, the Thorntons would learn that some things couldn't be bought and some people wouldn't break. Court day was intense from the moment we walked through the doors. The courthouse was packed. The Thorntons had claimed the entire front row on Vanessa's side of the gallery. Harrison and Beatrice sat there like royalty, dressed in expensive suits, their expressions radiating confidence. Julian sat beside them, looking smug in a 3-piece suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Various cousins, business associates, and family friends filled the remaining seats. all there to show support and intimidate me with their numbers. Vanessa sat at the plaintiff's table with Stephen Garrett, wearing a demure navy dress and pearls, her hair pulled back in a simple style. She looked like the perfect picture of a concerned mother. Her expression was one of wounded dignity, like she was the sufferer in all of this. As we took our seats, I heard Beatrice's whisper carry across the courtroom. She wasn't even trying to be subtle. "He'll never see that boy again." Harrison nodded, touching her hand. "We'll make sure of it." Garrett smirked at Laura, clearly confident in his case. "This will be quick," he said loud enough for us to hear. Dylan's hand tightened in mine. I squeezed back, keeping my expression neutral. Let them be confident. Let them think they'd already won. The fall would be that much harder. Judge Melissa Hartwell entered, and the bailiff called the court to order. Hartwell was a woman in her early 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. She surveyed the packed courtroom with an expression that suggested she'd seen every game lawyers played and wasn't impressed by any of them. "We're here for the custody hearing in the matter of Thornton versus Robertson," Judge Hartwell said, her voice carrying authority. "I've reviewed the filings from both parties, and I have to say this is one of the more contentious cases I've seen in recent months. Let's proceed with professionalism and respect for this court. Mr. Garrett, you may call your first witness." Garrett stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Dr. Leonard Marsh to the stand." Dr. Marsh was a thin man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses in a manner that suggested deep professional concern. He testified about his evaluation of Dylan and me, painting a picture of an unstable father who couldn't provide appropriate emotional support for his son. "The child exhibited signs of anxiety when discussing his father," Dr. Marsh said, his voice measured and clinical. "He seemed hesitant, as if afraid to speak freely. In contrast, when discussing his mother and maternal grandparents, he was relaxed and open. The body language was markedly different. Garrett led him through a series of questions designed to make me look like a danger to my own son. Marsh answered each one with the same concerned, professional demeanor. He was good at this. I could see why the Thorntons kept him on retainer. Then Laura stood for cross-examination, and I saw Marsh's confidence flicker just slightly. "Dr. Marsh," Laura said, her voice pleasant, "who paid for your evaluation of Dylan and Marcus Robertson?" "The Thornton family retained me for this case, and you've done work for them before, haven't you? In fact, looking at your client list, which we've subpoenaed, the Thornton family and their various business entities have paid you over $300,000 in the past 5 years for various evaluations and expert testimonies. Is that correct?" Marsh shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I've provided expert services for several of their legal matters, including evaluations in 3 previous custody cases where the Thornton family had an interest in the outcome. Correct?" "Yes. And in all 3 of those cases, you found in favor of the Thornton family's preferred custody arrangement. Is that accurate?" "I evaluated each case on its individual merits." Laura's tone made it clear what she thought of that claim. "Of course you did. Dr. Marsh, you spent how many hours total with Dylan Robertson?" "Approximately 2 hours. And how many of those hours were spent with Dylan alone, without members of the Thornton family present in the room or nearby?" A pause. Marsh glanced at Garrett, who couldn't help him. "Approximately 30 minutes. So the majority of your evaluation was conducted with the Thornton family, in the room, observing and potentially influencing Dylan's responses. Is that correct?" "They're his family. It's natural for them to be present during an evaluation. Except for his father, who specifically requested to be present, and was denied that opportunity. Isn't that right?" "I felt it was best to evaluate the child without the father present given the allegations. Allegations that came from the Thornton family, who was paying you $300,000 over 5 years. Laura let that sink in. "No further questions, Your Honor." Judge Hartwell made a note, her expression thoughtful. "Mr. Garrett, your next witness." I called Beatrice Thornton to the stand. Beatrice walked to the witness stand with perfect posture, every inch the dignified grandmother. She testified about Vanessa's devotion to Dylan, painting herself as a loving grandmother who only wanted what was best for her grandson. She claimed I had always been emotionally distant, that Dylan had confided in her multiple times about feeling neglected and frightened at home with me. "The boy needs stability," Beatrice said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue that appeared from nowhere. "He needs a mother's love and a family who can provide for him properly. Marcus has always been difficult, controlling. Dylan has told me he's afraid to disagree with his father. It was a masterful performance. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her myself. When Laura stood for cross-examination, Beatrice's expression turned cold, the mask slipping just slightly. "Mrs. Thornton," Laura said, "you texted my client 3 weeks ago, threatening him, didn't you?" "I never did any such thing." Beatrice's voice was eased. Laura produced a document. "This text came from a phone number registered to your family business. The message reads, 'Stop fighting this. You'll only hurt Dylan. He belongs with his mother.' Do you deny sending this?" "I have no knowledge of that message. Anyone could have used that phone." "I see, Mrs. Thornton. How many nights per week did your daughter spend at home with Dylan in the past year?" "I don't keep track of my daughter's schedule. She's a grown woman." According to calendar evidence we've obtained through discovery, Vanessa was traveling for work approximately 3 weeks out of every month. On the weeks she was in town, she spent at least 3 nights per week at your home or at the home of Ricardo Castellano. Isn't it true that Dylan spent more time with nannies and his father than with his mother? Beatrice's lips thinned into a hard line. Vanessa is a busy professional. She's building a career in public service. That requires sacrifices. A career that's more important than raising her own son? Objection. Garrett was on his feet. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Hartwell said. Move on, Ms. Kim. Laura smiled slightly. No further questions, Your Honor. The morning continued with more Thornton witnesses. Friends who claimed to have seen me drinking heavily at social events. Neighbors who said Dylan seemed unhappy when he was with me. Julian Walter, who testified that I'd threatened him during a phone call, conveniently leaving out the part where he'd tried to bribe me. Each time, Laura's cross-examination revealed the same pattern. Witnesses with financial or personal ties to the Thornton family. Testimonies that contradicted documented evidence or couldn't be corroborated. Stories that fell apart under scrutiny. By lunch, Judge Hartwell's expression had shifted from neutral to skeptical. She was starting to see through the Thorntons' carefully constructed narrative. The afternoon session began with Vanessa herself taking the stand. This was the performance she'd been preparing for. She wore her emotions perfectly, crying at appropriate moments, talking about her love for Dylan, expressing concern about my increasingly erratic behavior. I just want my son to be safe and happy, Vanessa said, looking directly at Judge Hartwell with tears in her eyes. I've dedicated my life to being a good mother. It breaks my heart that Marcus is using Dylan as a weapon against me, trying to punish me for wanting a divorce. Garrett led her through questions designed to paint me as controlling, jealous, and unstable. Vanessa answered with practiced emotion, the perfect picture of a wronged mother fighting for her child. I watched Dylan beside me, saw his jaw clench as his mother lied under oath. When Laura stood for cross-examination, Dylan sat up straighter. This was it. Ms. Thornton, Laura said, you testified that you've dedicated your life to being a good mother. Can you tell me where Dylan was on his 11th birthday? Vanessa blinked, clearly not expecting that question. We had a party for him. Did you attend that party? A hesitation. I believe I was traveling for work, but we celebrated when I returned. According to your ex-husband's testimony and photographic evidence, you were in Miami at a resort hotel with Ricardo Castellano. You sent Dylan a text message wishing him happy birthday, but didn't call or video chat. Is that correct? I was at a conference. At a resort hotel, sharing a room with Mr. Castellano. According to hotel records we've subpoenaed, this was 14 months ago, 7 months before you filed for divorce. Isn't it true that you've been having an affair with Ricardo Castellano for at least 18 months? The courtroom erupted. Garrett was shouting objections. Beatrice was on her feet. Harrison's face had turned purple. Judge Hartwell banged her gavel hard. Order! Mr. Garrett, sit down. Ms. Thornton, answer the question. Vanessa's perfect composure cracked. My relationship with Ricardo is none of your business. It is when you're claiming moral superiority in a custody case, Laura said calmly. It is when you're asking this court to believe you're the dedicated present parent. Ms. Thornton, how many of Dylan's soccer games did you attend last season? I don't know exactly. Several. According to the coach's attendance records, which we've obtained, 0. You attended 0 games. His father attended all 24. How many parent-teacher conferences did you attend last year? Vanessa's jaw tightened. My work schedule is demanding. 0, Miss Thornton. The answer is 0. His father attended all 4. How many times in the past year have you taken Dylan to the doctor, the dentist, or any medical appointment? Silence. 0 again. Every single medical, dental, and optometry appointment was handled by his father. So when you say you've dedicated your life to being a good mother, what exactly do you mean? What have you dedicated besides photo opportunities and court testimony? Vanessa's face was flushed, tears streaming, but now they looked less like grief and more like fury. How dare you question my love for my son? No further questions, Your Honor. After recess, Garrett called a few more witnesses trying to rebuild, but the damage was done. Judge Hartwell's questions had gotten sharper, more skeptical. Finally, Garrett rested. Laura stood up and said she wanted to call Dylan to the stand. My 12-year-old son walked up there with his shoulders back and his head high. Judge Hartwell was gentle with him, asked him where he wanted to live. Dylan said he wanted to show her something first. Pulled out his phone. The courtroom went dead silent. Beatrice went pale. Harrison leaned forward frowning. Vanessa looked confused. Judge Hartwell studied Dylan's face and nodded. He connected his phone to the courtroom audio system and pressed play. Beatrice's voice filled the room. The boy needs to understand his place. He'll testify that he wants to stay with Vanessa, or we'll make sure he regrets it. People gasped. Dylan played the next one. Vanessa slurring, Mother, he's 12. He's not going to understand the big picture. Ricardo saying, Once you have full custody, we can proceed with the trust fund restructuring. The kid doesn't need to know his grandmother left him that money. Harrison's voice. Exactly. With Marcus out of the picture, we can move forward with our plans. Boarding school in Switzerland, then whatever university we choose. He'll be useful to the family business eventually. Then Vanessa laughing. God, I can't believe I wasted 13 years pretending to be a devoted mother. At least it'll make good campaign material. The dedicated single mom who fought for her child. The courtroom exploded. Garrett was shouting. Beatrice was screaming at Dylan to stop. Harrison was on his feet demanding the judge halt everything. Judge Hartwell's gavel cracked like thunder. She told everyone to sit down or she'd clear the courtroom. Dylan played more recordings, them coaching him to lie. Discussing bribes to Dr. Marsh. Vanessa and Ricardo planning their wedding. The sound of a slap and Beatrice's voice saying, You stupid girl, you're being too obvious about the affair. Dylan stopped and looked at Judge Hartwell. His voice was steady despite the chaos. I have 14 more, Your Honor. They're all like this. I started recording after Grandma Beatrice sent me a text telling me to lie about my dad. I was scared, but I wanted proof of what they were really like. Judge Hartwell's face was stone. She called both attorneys to the bench. The whispered conversation was intense. When they came back, she recessed for 30 minutes and suggested Garrett consult with his clients. Said the court takes perjury, witness tampering, and corruption extremely seriously. In the conference room, Dylan was shaking as the adrenaline wore off. Asked if he did okay. If the judge believed him. Laura said he'd just handed us the most decisive custody victory she'd seen in 20 years. Back in court, the Thorntons looked destroyed. Beatrice's makeup was streaked. Harrison was ashen. Vanessa sat slumped, not meeting anyone's eyes. Ricardo had disappeared. Judge Hartwell said she was referring the matter to the DA for investigation into witness tampering, perjury, and fraud. She was suspending Dr. Marsh's ability to serve as a court expert, pending medical board review. Then she looked at Dylan and told him he'd shown remarkable courage, that he'd done the right thing even though it was hard. She granted me full physical and legal custody effective immediately. Vanessa got supervised visitation only, 2 hours every other Saturday, supervised by a court-appointed monitor at her expense. She ordered an investigation into Dylan's inheritance and any accounts the Thorntons had improperly handled. All of Dylan's assets would go into a court-supervised trust until he turned 18. She told Harrison and Beatrice they were to have no contact with Dylan outside Vanessa's supervised visits. No calls, texts, gifts, or attempts to see him at school. Violation would mean contempt charges and possible criminal stalking charges. The gavel fell. I pulled Dylan into my arms and he finally cried. Relief, triumph, release from months of pressure and fear. Laura was grinning, shaking our hands. The Thorntons filed out in silence, their empire of lies crumbling. In the hallway, reporters were gathering. I shielded Dylan from the cameras. One reporter asked what I had to say about the decision. I paused, thought about everything the Thorntons had tried to do, everything they'd underestimated. I said, I have my son. That's all that matters. 3 months later, the DA's investigation is ongoing. Ricardo got charged with attempted fraud regarding Dylan's inheritance. Dr. Marsh lost his license. Julian's under investigation for bribery. Harrison and Beatrice face multiple witness tampering charges. Vanessa's attended 3 supervised visits. The first 2 were awkward. The third time, she actually apologized. A real apology, without excuses. Dylan listened and said he needed time. She nodded, crying, and said she understood. I don't know if Dylan will ever forgive his mother. That's his choice to make when he's ready. For now, we're building a life together without the weight of the Thorntons' expectations and manipulation. Dylan's doing great. He's working on a science fair project about suspension bridges that I'm helping him design. His teacher asked if he wanted to talk to the class about standing up to bullies. He said yes. Said what the Thorntons did was bullying, using their power to control him and hurt me. He wants to tell his story so other kids know they can speak up, even against adults, even against people who seem powerful. That night after Dylan went to bed, I stood in his doorway watching him sleep. He'd been through hell, forced to grow up too fast, had to record his own family's cruelty to protect himself. But he emerged stronger, more compassionate, more determined to help others. Laura texted me that the grand jury indicted Harrison on 3 counts of witness tampering and conspiracy to commit fraud. Beatrice got 2 counts. Vanessa took a plea deal, probation and mandatory counseling in exchange for testimony against her parents. We won. Not just custody, not just the legal battle, but something more important. We proved that integrity and love are stronger than corruption and greed. We showed that a father's dedication and a kid's bravery can overcome even the most powerful enemies. The Thorntons' carefully constructed image crumbled. Their influence is waning as criminal charges mount. Vanessa will have to rebuild her relationship with Dylan from nothing, earning every minute of trust. But Dylan and I, we have everything we need. We have each other. We have truth on our side, and we have a future built on honesty and love. In the mornings, we make pancakes and work on homework. Dylan goes to school. I go to work. Life continues in its quiet, steady way. No more courtrooms, no more battles with powerful families. Just a father and son building something strong together. Something that can't be bought, manipulated, or destroyed. Something real.